Welcome to my channel. This is JC Rock and Metal Reviews. My name is John, and today I will be ranking the albums by the band Ministry. Ministry is an industrial metal band. They've kind of gone through different changes over the years. There are 15 albums. Their first album from 1983 up to their newest album called Moral Hygiene from 2021. So let me just get right into this. Coming at number 15 is with Sympathy from 1983. This is their debut album. They were actually a completely different band back then. They were like new wave and synth pop. Think of a band like Depeche Mode. Al Jorgensen didn't sing in his aggressive, like distorted, like style. He sang in like with like a fake British accent. I think if you like that type of music, it's not that bad of an album. But I put it at the end because it just doesn't really represent the band at all. It's just the only reason why I have it at number 15. But I think if you like that kind of music, maybe you might like this type of album. So coming in number 14 is From Beer to Eternity from 2013. I think this is actually their weakest album, out of all of their like industrial metal albums. There's a lot of sound samples, a lot of industrial beats, but it just kind of like lacks, that like heavy guitar. The opener, Hail to His Majesty, very slow, very heavy drum beat. Perfect Storm, just filled with samples, and it does have that heavy guitar, almost like a punk rock feel. Lesson Unlearned, the use of some like strange like new wave vocals and rock guitar. But all in all, this album is just one I just really didn't enjoy that much. Coming in number 13 is AmeriKKKant from 2018. So this is basically the first album during the Trump presidency. They use a lot of samples like from his speeches. So the first track, I Know Words, it's kind of like a filler track. The next song, Twilight Zone, brings back a sound similar to like Scarecrow from Psalm 69. It's kind of slow and heavy. Wargasm has some electronic bass sounds and a heavy drum beat. Antifa, it's a slow and heavy song, lots of sound samples. This album is just okay, but the album as a whole is not that great. Coming in at number 12 is Twitch from 1986. This is their second album, and it's still kind of that new wave sound, but they do move into that like industrial metal sound, but there's still a lot of like a dance pop sound. So, for example, the opening track is called Just Like You. It has an industrial beat, but there are some samples taken from movies. The vocals are a little darker, but there are some more like danceable sounds and hints of their past new wave sound. Has a very heavy like electronic sound and not much of that heavy guitar sound. Over the Shoulder starts with an industrial beat and electronic sounds. There are sound samples. The vocals do have like kind of that like same new wave with that fake British accent sound. Nothing like the vocals used in his later albums, but I think this one was like a little better than like the first one. Coming in number 11 is Animositisomina. I don't know how to say that. Animositisomina, something like that. This one came out in 2003. The opening track, Animosity, has some kind of thrashy guitars, distorted vocals, an industrial drum beat, and sound samples, everything you expect from a Ministry album. Unsung had like a distorted garage rock sound with kind of like death metal vocals and a heavy guitar sound. Lockbox had like a very raw drum sound and some distorted vocals. The album is kind of mixed. It did lack those sound samples. I have it at number 11. It's okay, but we are getting a little better at this point. Coming at number 10 is Dark Side of the Spoon from 1999. So this one is not too bad. I think the albums start to get pretty good from here on in. The opening song, Super Maniac Soul, it has really heavy guitar sound. And kind of that sound reminiscent of the sound from Psalm 69. There's some distorted vocals and kind of like almost like a funk sound. Whip and Chain, that has a heavy industrial beat. Has kind of like this fuzzy guitar sound mixed with distortion. And the vocals bring back that like new wave style. Eureka Pile, that one has like a grunge sounding guitar riff and like an industrial drum beat. And Nursing Home has that like thick distorted bass with like a banjo in the background. That's pretty cool, but this album is like very mixed. Coming in at number 9 is Relapse from 2012. So this album starts with the song Ghoul Diggers. I think they made a music video for this one. Has a slow start, takes about like 2 minutes to get going, but it's kind of catchy, fast-paced song. Double Tap, that's a fast and heavy song. They do a cover of United Forces from the thrash band SOD. Weekend Warrior is pretty cool, does have like a slight modern rock feel with a heavy bass sound. Has a really heavy metal guitar riff as well. The vocals sound like Cartman from South Park for some reason, I don't know why. Get Up and Get Out, or Get Up, Get Out and Vote is a political song. It uses some sound samples and like aggressive vocals, and this is pretty good, but you know, the other ones are a lot better. Coming in at number 8 is The Land of Rape and Honey from 1988. Now this one ended up being a lot lower than I expected. And you know, when I first thought about doing this, I was expecting this to appear like around like maybe number 3 or 4, but it was one of the albums I owned back in the early 90s. But this is where Ministry like becomes the band we all know. It has that electronic sound, you know, the sound's a lot heavier. The first track, Stigmata, that's a really classic. Really heavy, distorted guitar sound, and Al's vocals are really distorted, you know, the way from the other albums. That song has a really heavy industrial beat. The next song, The Missing, very heavy beat, very thrashy guitars and aggressive vocals. And the title track does bring back a little of that dance beat, but includes like sound samples and electronic sounds. The vocals are very distorted, but the beat also sounds a little like that like rap music of that period. Now with this album, the first 3 songs are killer, but it does kind of start to drag like towards the end. So that's why I have this only at number 8. Otherwise it would have been a lot higher. At number 7, I have Filth Pig from 1996. So this was the follow-up to the very successful Psalm 69. They did change their sound a bit on this one. Not much of those thrashy guitars, but more of like a thick bass sound. The opener Reload has some aggressive vocals. Very repetitive bass sound and an industrial drum beat. The title track is a slower song, similar to like Scarecrow from Psalm 69. And that song like had like an alternative metal sound, similar to like Rage Against the Machine. So they did like experiment a little with some sounds, but I did like this album pretty much. Just the other ones are a lot better. At number 6, I have the new one, Moral Hygiene from 2021. So big improvement over the last few albums. It brings back their classic late 80s, early 90s sound. There's a cover of the Stooges, Search and Destroy. Very solid album. I do have a full review of this, and I will link it at the end of the video. At number 5 is Rio Grande Blood from 2006. So in the 2000s, during the George Bush presidency, they put out 3 albums, and those 3 albums are ranked very high on this list. And those 3 albums are also like a return to that really heavy, like early 90s sound, the one that sound that really made them famous. But this one, Rio Grande Blood, is probably like, it's a great album, but the weakest of those 3 albums. Starts with a title track, has samples of George Bush and heavy thrashy guitars. Señor Peligro, it's another fast and heavy song, almost like a death metal feel. Lies, Lies, Lies is a really great song, has like a thrash metal riff. Includes sound samples that are kind of like questioning the like 9/11 narrative. Very solid album. Just that those last 2 songs, Khyber Pass and Sergeant Major Redux, they kind of like drag the album down a little bit, but otherwise really killer album. And number 4 is The Mind is a Terrible Thing to Taste. This is from 1989. Now this one actually expected to fall at number 2. But there are a few of the newer ones I did like better. Really killer album. Has that classic heavy industrial metal sound. The opening track, Thieves, that's a classic. Has a very heavy industrial beat. Lots of heavy machinery sound samples. Very fast, repetitive machine gun riff. That song changes tempo after about the first minute. It gets like faster and heavier. Another one of the top songs is called So What. That song takes a while to kind of get going, but has like a long intro, but really heavy guitar riff, really heavy vocals. That song is great. Burning Inside, great song, a very thrashy guitar riff, and it sounds similar to the songs on like Psalm 69. That album will be appearing later on in this ranking. This is a very solid album all the way through. I like this one a lot. Coming in number 3 is Houses of the Molé from 2004. So this is the first album in their George Bush trilogy. Songs are mostly criticizing the then president. So the album starts with No W Redux. This album brings back that heavy sound from the early 90s. WTV has sound samples from News heavy guitars. This one has a sound similar to like TV2 from Psalm 69. Very heavy, hardcore punk rock sound samples. The song Worm has a slow 9-minute song and has an industrial drum beat with electronic alternative rock melody. And this album is a return to form and one of their best. But at number 2, I have The Last Sucker from 2007. This is the third album from the George Bush trilogy, and my favorite. I think this is the one that doesn't really have any filler. It's just solid from start to finish. First song, Let's Go. Sound sample, heavy thrashy riff, industrial drum beat. Life is Good, really thick guitar riff and like a very heavy beat. No Glory has this really heavy stop-start guitar riff with a very fast, like thrash metal rhythm. And the last 2 songs, End of Days Parts 1 and 2. Really good ending tracks. Ministry is a kind of band that kind of like the end of their album. Sometimes they kind of drag. But this is the one album, besides my number 1 pick, that really doesn't really drag. And the best of those like George W. Bush albums. And the number 1 is Psalm 69, The Way to Succeed and The Way to Suck Eggs from 1992. This is their best album. NWO has that classic siren sound, very heavy industrial beat. Al's vocals are just very aggressive. Very heavy guitar riff that's simple but effective. Just one fix. Very heavy drum beat in that one. The guitar riff sounds like classic thrash metal. Hero, that's another great song. Heavy song with sound samples and kind of sounds like a crowd going wild. And this one has a really great thrash metal riff. Jesus Built My Hot Rod. That's a very classic, played on MTV back in the day. Almost reminded me a lot of the band Primus doing industrial metal. And they slow it down with the song Scarecrow, still a very heavy song. This is a killer album, just like start to finish. So that is it. Let me know in the comments what you thought of my ranking, what would you have higher or lower. And that is my ranking of the Ministry albums. So this is JC Rock and Metal Reviews. I will be back tomorrow with another episode of Best of the Worst with the best of Metallica, the 3 lowest ranked albums. So stick around for that. This is my review of Moral Hygiene right there. And thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.